We're turning now to the essential role that governments must play if we're going to see crime and victimization reduced in Canada and a better use of our taxes. And to reap the benefits and to get the prevention dividend from an upstream in prevention, we need all orders of government, federal, provincial, and municipal, to support both those community safety plans, those collaborative community safety strategies, which have a small cost to be developed, but we also need to ensure that there's investment in the actions, be it to do with youth or in schools or in the police, that will give us real reductions in crime. Investing upstream is the subject of another video, but in simple terms, it's about tackling risk factors guided by those municipal strategies that have been talked about in the community safety strategy video, and it's improving broad social policy, investing in jobs for youth and childcare. A Canada committed to reducing violence is in fact the Canada we live in, but we've got to get Canada to do what they say they are committed to. So Canada is already committed to direct resources to protect society with the least interference in rights, that have the greatest impact, informed by evidence and with feedback from Canadians. And that is a quote from the mandate letters written by Prime Minister Trudeau, for instance, to the Minister of Justice, to the Minister responsible for status of women, for the Minister of Public Safety. Also in Canada, the Minister of Justice quite recently has put an emphasis on reviewing the criminal justice system. It's very clear that the solutions to the challenges of the criminal justice system, overcrowding in prisons, expensive jails, too many Indigenous people in prison, lie outside that system. And she wants it to be based on evidence, compassion to victims, and to results, and to helping protect the public. Canada is also committed to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and while we don't, many of us are not that familiar with these goals, basically every government across the world has committed to reductions in a number of things, and for us, reductions in violence against women, reductions in abuse of drugs, safer cities, reductions in street violence by 2030. And those sustainable development goals include one that has to do with upstream investment, using knowledge, and multi-sectoral. It says exactly what the evidence says, so we need to move on those. We also live with a government that is committed to implementing the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And these include a number of broad socioeconomic development issues like creating jobs and childcare, but they also include a vision to reduce overrepresentation of Indigenous people in prison. And you cannot achieve that without investing in the sorts of stuff that the evidence says will reduce violence against Indigenous peoples. So some provinces are already committed to action in this area. Saskatchewan has been a leader with its vision for building partnerships to reduce crime. A lot of this has had to do with these hubs, but some of it has to do with those multi-sectoral community safety strategies. Ontario has been talking. It has major publications on a framework for prevention based on the evidence. It has looked at some of the actions in cities, and it has been talking about legislating community safety and well-being plans. Now this colored target is very important to us. In the red, you have the reaction to crime. In the yellow, you have those hubs, and the two outer circles are what are really important in terms of upstream. The outer one, green, is about those broad social development policies, and the blue is where you get the best return in the short term on investment. It's also important to see that the Toronto Police Services Board, in collaboration with the top executives of the Toronto Police Service and in discussion with the police union, has gone for three priority actions. One is use police resources where they're best used. Secondly, partnerships, and then a third one that has to do with sophistication. And those partnerships have to do with tackling, with social agencies tackling those problems, and they want to see a 10% reduction in policing costs. Now, if you look at the Canadian trends in terms of spending, what you see is this escalation in policing costs over the last 10 or 15 years, roughly doubling. You see a continued, even today, you see provinces using what I consider 19th century methods to try and solve 21st century problems. And they're adding more courts, they're adding more prosecutors, and they're wondering why they have to build more jails. But what has lagged in all this are the real solutions, the 21st century solutions to crime problems. The most effective, cost-effective way to eliminate violence is prevention. That's what the evidence shows, and all the rest is very expensive picking up the pieces. Now, the municipal network has its own call for financial support from all levels of government, multi-sectoral strategies, tackling the risk factors at multiple levels. This means that federal, provincial, territorial and municipal governments need to recognize that vital role for municipalities as being close to the ground, able to mobilize, and it needs that there has to be matched funding because they do not have the funding to achieve this, in part because police budgets have ballooned so much, but also because they only get 9% of the tax in Canada. Canada must find more cost-effective ways to deal with crime, ways that are evidence-based, that are compassionate to victims and protect the public. The Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention has proposed three key actions. One is to establish offices for crime prevention in all orders of government. The second is to organize an annual conference so that people and agencies engaged in prevention can share the successes and can develop new solutions. The third is a partnership between federal, provincial, territorial governments and municipalities to ensure a serious investment in prevention. If these three actions occurred, costing the equivalent of 10% of what we currently are spending on reacting to crime, we could expect significant reductions in crime before 2030. 1 million fewer victims of assaults and violent crime, 2 million fewer victims of theft and property crime. This would save about 25 billion or more in harm to victims. The required investment is important, is 2 billion, but this would counterbalance the 6 billion that we have added in the last 15 years to the reaction budget, but would achieve potential savings in reaction costs of 4 billion or more annually.